It was mentioned last evening at the pilots meeting, but we are so fortunate this year to have our inductees as being folks who are amongst the truly great people in our sport. We are so pleased to have those folks who have been the pioneers in development and in the sport of ballooning. It's my personal pleasure to introduce James A. Winker. Mr. Winker was born December 28th in Randall, Minnesota, and has spent a lifetime in balloon development and in ballooning. And I might hasten to add, it's not over yet. Some of Jim's early balloon experiences were he was a crew member for a 1947 flight of Don Picard's converted Japanese bomber balloon, Fugo balloon. He participated in the preparation, inflation, free flight in the first modern hot air balloon flight, and that was that of Ed Yost. Jim received his first free balloon pilot certificate in 1962. His first solo flight, not under instruction, was in Led Zeppelin and was in 1970. Jim became an FAA balloon pilot examiner in 1973 and again in 1984. And he also piloted Raven's hot air blimp, which I just saw a glimpse of there a minute ago on the screen. Raven's hot air blimp Starship Enterprise at its world debut in Lucerne, Switzerland in 1975. He flew as a part of the opening ceremony in the Lake Placid Olympics, and Jim originated the design for the modern sport balloon now known as Quickfill. Jim retired from Raven Industries in 1990, completing 35 years of work in balloons and development of hot air ballooning. Jim has competencies in ballooning management, research and development, planning, balloon design, scientific and sport balloons, heavy lift balloons, air-launched balloon techniques, remotely piloted airships, balloon and airship pilot deployable aerodynamic deacceleration and recovery systems. Wow. Digital and photographic imagery, and he is, of course, a balloon historian. Jim's education started at the University of Minnesota, Minneapolis, where he received a BA in aeronautical engineering, a BA in business administration, and also then in 1965 a short course in aerodynamic deacceleration. He also attended the U.S. Air Force Extension Course Institute as a squadron officer school in 1964, air weather officer in 1965, military management in 1967, microcomputer programming in 1982, and in 1990, world-class manufacturing. He started his working career in May of 1951 and worked until September of 54 for General Mills as a junior engineer associated with internal pressure balloons, stratosphere balloon design, data analysis, and also working with small tracer and carrier balloons. He developed a particle sizing apparatus for biological agents during that time. He spent 2 years with the U.S. Air Force as development officer in superpressure balloon development. He attained the rank of major and is now holds the rank of U.S. Air Force Major Retired. The next 35 years were spent in a variety of progressively responsible positions for Raven Industries Incorporated in Sioux Falls. Jim started as a senior engineer responsible for stratosphere balloon design and then became the chief engineer for supervision and development, test, and quality control. He worked on a deployable parachute system which would become a balloon. It started out as a parachute, would become a balloon, and fly the pilot out of a trouble area. Jim will probably correct me on this, but it was my understanding that that was the origin of the modern hot air balloon. That was the really the development that led to Ed Yost's flight. He said, huh, so scratch that one. Jim became the balloon division managers for Raven Industries from 1966 to 1970, when he was promoted to vice president of the Applied Technology Division, and his final position at Raven Industries was as vice president of Raven Industries. Mr. Winker holds a variety of patents covering balloons, parachutes, manufacturing, and has over 24 publications to his credit, as well as being a presenter at many balloon safety seminars and symposiums. I would also add that to this list, he has been a contributor to over 10 books in ballooning. Jim belongs to the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, Tau Omega, Balloon Federation of America, and the British Balloon and Airship Club. He's listed in the Who's Who in Aviation and Aerospace. He was a recipient of the BFA Shields Trauger Award. He is an honorary life member in the Lighter Than Air Society, and he was elected Associate Fellow of the AIAA and received the AIAA Otto C. Winson Lifetime Achievement Award. The thing I would add just as a personal note to all of this is that when I first met Jim in the early 70s and many years thereafter, my first impression was, what a nice guy. And as I talked to him on the field last evening, I had that same impression. What a nice guy. It's my personal honor to induct James A. Winker into the Balloon Federation of America Hall of Fame. Jim? Might want to get a picture of that. If you would, I'd like to have you take a seat again. I'm going to have a couple other people fill in and flesh out this a little bit, and that's a person who was started to be introduced a moment ago, Orv Olivier and Becky Pope. Orv is the chairman of our Hall of Fame committee for the BFA. Becky was the curator of the Sukup Thomas Museum in, wasn't Sioux Falls, it was Mitchell, South Dakota. If you two would care to step up. And while you're coming up, one other board member of the Balloon Federation, Ken Walter, has walked in. Ken, just introduction, wave your hand, say hi. Okay. Thank you very much.
First off, Becky and I have been friends for a lot of years, so it's fun for us to get to do this together.
I had my first balloon ride and my first lesson with Orv 29 years ago.
Before we talk about Jim, I'd like to just kind of ramble a little bit about pioneers and legends in general. And the thing I find interesting is, like Gary said, the people we're introducing today really fall into the category of pioneers. But what I really find interesting about the pioneers, the true pioneers of ballooning, is that they really all come from almost a common background. Common background is Minneapolis, Minnesota. And why Minneapolis? Well, in Minneapolis, from my standpoint, Carl and Jim can correct me a little bit, but there was two things going on in Minneapolis which caused these people to get involved in ballooning. One was the University of Minnesota, where they had, an aeronautics program, got involved in ballooning, and the other one was General Mills. And you say, General Mills, they make cereal. Well, General Mills had a contracting division that did a lot of things other than make cereal, and one of the things they did was they built high-altitude helium balloons. And many people, several names you'll recognize all come out of this background. The obvious ones are Jim Winker, Carl Steffen, Lucy Steffen, right? Lucy went to the University of Minnesota, was in that class. That's where I met Carl. And there were the Picards, the Picard family, Jean Picard and Jeanette Picard, who set the early high-altitude records for anybody getting off the face of the earth. And then their son, which we all know, Don, who still lives there. Tracy Barnes. Tracy came out of Minnesota. Now attended the University of Minnesota. So the early roots of the balloon, have to do with Minneapolis. Then it migrated to Sioux Falls when several of the people left General Mills and came to Sioux Falls to start Raven Industries. And then after that, a few other people followed them down, including Russ Pohl and Jim Winker. And that's where the actual hot air balloon got developed. So we think of the Midwest as being, the real birthplace of the hot air balloon. But when I think of Indianola, Iowa, I also think of this is pretty much the birthplace of probably modern hot air balloon competition in the entire world. I mean, true hot air balloon competition all started here. So, right here in the Midwest, we got an awful lot to be proud of as far as the heritage, worldwide heritage of the modern hot air balloon. Gary did a tremendous job introducing Jim. I'd like to just ramble a little bit more because I've known Jim pretty much my entire adult life. When I was a young adult in my 20s, I started working at Raven Industries, and they made a position for me in the hot air balloon division, and Jim was my boss. Jim was in charge of the whole balloon division, and if you look at the modern hot air balloon today, Jim's fingerprints are absolutely all over modern hot air balloons. In addition to the things that Gary said, one thing I'd like to just probably emphasize again is there's probably no hot air balloon pilot in the world that's had a hot air balloon license longer than Jim Winker. So Jim is the holder of the oldest hot air balloon pilot's license in the entire world, as far as I know. So I think that's just a And I was mentioning that Jim is a premier hot air, I would say hot air historian, that's not really true, balloon historian. And Jim and I have been having fun the last number of years collaborating on a number of things. And whenever we get into something, Jim goes back home and he can pull out pictures and documentation. And I think the question came to us just recently by Jim Thompson, or somebody asked, I believe it was Jim that asked, well, how long was Ed Yost's first flight? Was it 45 minutes? And I said, no, I don't think it was that long, but I don't know. Maybe Jim would know. Well, I asked Jim, and Jim says, no, but let me work on that. It turns out Jim has got the barograph trace from Ed Yost's first flight in his house. And he digs it out, and there it was. The answer is, ready for a drum roll, everybody? The first flight was, Jim? 28 minutes, according to the barograph. So, and Jim is also, as was previously mentioned, attended every hot air balloon world championship in the world that's ever been held. So I think that's a tremendous accomplishment as well. So.
As I mentioned, I was for a number of years, the director and the curator at the Balloon Museum in Tyndall, South Dakota, and then Mitchell, South Dakota. And I save everything. Anybody recognize this? During in 1990, Balloon Museum in Tyndall, South Dakota hosted the 6th World Gas Balloon Championships and the 1st World Rosier Balloon Championships. In addition to the 2 World Championships, we had another competition take place called the Winker Cup, and it was in honor of Jim. And the Winker Cup, as I said, was held during the World Gas Balloon and Rosier Balloon Championships in Tyndall, South Dakota. It was named in honor of Jim and was co-sponsored by Aerostar International. It was a competition for smaller gas balloons with a maximum size of 600 cubic meters, which is up to the AA3 category. Competition was designed as a comparison test to see how well the smaller balloons could compete, as well as a fun competition based on the BFA's gas division rules, and there were 3 competitors who took part. And I don't recall the outcome of the competition.
I think I was second, but I don't remember. Who was?
It was, let me turn the page. Mike Wallace. Okay. Then you and Maureen Lynch.
Yeah, because she decided she was going to throw a classroom from a flight.
Oh, okay. Okay. So they were the 3 competitors. And both Gary and Orv have talked in the past few minutes about the patents that Jim has held, always his inventiveness. And I don't know if Jim knows this or not, but I had breakfast with your younger brother and sister-in-law last week. I live in the south side of the Twin Cities and met them and have had a few conversations with them. And they shared a few little tidbits. Jim was always very inventive. When he and his brothers were children, a new house was being constructed on their farm property. And the dirt and the sand pile created by the foundation excavation was just too big a temptation for young boys to ignore. Well, Mrs. Winker was concerned of the wear and tear to the knees of their overalls, so Jim devised some protective gear he hoped would help alleviate his mother's concerns. He fashioned leg coverings from old tractor tire inner tubes, cut off lengths, pulled them on, so then he had protection for the knees of his overalls and could play to his heart's content. And then Gary alluded to parachutes. Well, that started maybe at about the age of 11 or 12. Jim's interest in aeronautical design began to show itself. Their father had a Farmall tractor with a large umbrella that fits to the tractor frame, and it protects the farmer from the hot sun while he's working in the field. And he thought that might make a good parachute. So with his little brother looking on, he climbed atop the outhouse, opened the umbrella, and jumped. Unfortunately, the attempt was not very successful, and he landed in a heap in the dirt, and his admonishment to his little brother who came to look on was, "Please don't tell Mom." So, it's been fun, Jim, and many more years.
I'd like to say, touch on 2 more subjects before Jim comes up. One is that Jim's obviously been flying balloons for a very long time, and when Jim was flying much more actively than he does today, he flew more or less smaller balloons than we're flying today. But Jim always fails to amaze me how he can get into any balloon and fly it very well. And Jim's come down to Leon, Mexico with me a few times, and we're flying under somewhat challenging conditions, cold temperatures, butane, low pressure, extremely low power output over a lake, and Jim would fly that balloon very well. We had the privilege of flying last night for the Hall of Fame inductees, and Jim and Carl flew in my balloon last night, and I let Jim fly it again, and he was masterful, to say the least, and I'm just always impressed of Jim's ability. And then the last thing I'm going to say about Jim is when he gets up to speak, you're going to notice this outfit he's wearing. And what's that all about, you know? Well, back in the 70s, mid to late 70s, I'm guessing, Raven built a new company balloon, and it was a black balloon with a spiral that went through it of the design, so they made jumpsuits for all of us and distributors and stuff, and we all had this jumpsuit that looked like that balloon. It was very distinctive. And if you remember Indianola, in the 70s, jumpsuits were the big item, you know. We all wore jumpsuits. So we had, like, really distinctive jumpsuits. Well, personally, I can't wear a jumpsuit that I probably would have gotten 6 years ago. This jumpsuit for Jim came in the 70s, and he can still wear it, which I can hardly believe, but it's, I think that's really amazing. So that's all I have. So I guess it's your turn, Jim.
Well, I have not much for me to say. First of all, what I need to say, it is very humbling to be here in front of this row of distinguished gentlemen that have preceded me. And that is a really, really great honor to be among them. That's something that I will always remember. You've pretty well got the general background of what I've been doing, so maybe I can get to a few specifics. When I knew that I was going to have to do this, I sat down and said, well, what might people be interested in? And a thought occurred to me. I'd seen a movie, a foreign movie, one of these oddball things, and the name of the movie was After Life, 2 words, After Life. And the theory of the movie, the theme of it was that when it's time for us to depart this world, we don't just get put in a box and put in the ground. You first go to some intermediate spot, intermediate place, and you are greeted there, and you are offered the chance to have one of your memories of your lifetime put in with you to take on into the afterlife. And I'm losing my train of thought here. What they would do was replicate this one memory that you chose, repeat it, rebuild it, and then put it on a DVD, and you carry that off on with you. So I thought, well, if I was faced with that sort of situation, what would I choose? And here I'll try to run through a few of the things that certainly you've seen this maybe on the board up there. This is the Fugo balloon, and these will be available later if you want to look at them more closely. That was my gateway into ballooning. I was in the ROTC program, Reserve Officer Training School, at the University of Minnesota, and Don Picard had made this balloon up, and he wanted to fly it, and he wanted the ROTC people to be his crew. And so I'm his crew. I'm down there somewhere. And so that's one option. Actually, it's not probably the best option because I had such a small part in it, and that wasn't really mine. Later on, let's see my cards there. Well, I spent 2 years in the Air Force, and from ROTC you had an obligation. And because I had this experience that you've already heard about at General Mills, I was able to be assigned to the ballooning group at Air Force Cambridge Research Center in Boston. So I spent my 2-year tour of duty with the Air Force doing more balloon work. A couple of the things, I won't go into them deeply. My duties there were rather varied. And so I was involved a little bit in a number of different programs. One of them was launching inflated balloons from airplanes. You got to know that's a little bit of a problem. There was something going on then that got publicity at one time, but I don't know, people may have forgotten about it now. In the 50s, we needed a lot of intelligence information on what was going on in Russia. And so they developed a program to build balloons with cameras on them, send them over Russia, and then pick them up at the other end into the Sea of Japan. I was only remotely involved in that, but that was one of the things. And then there was another one, I had a little more involvement. They were going to take that was the days of atom bomb testings of all sorts. They wanted to know everything they could know about atom bombs. So they wanted to know what would happen if one exploded very, very high in the atmosphere. And so, okay, what better we could have than a balloon to do that job? Involved with that, of course, were the instrumentation to make the measurements so they knew what happened. Well, my job was to develop the apparatus to contain the instrumentation and hang it below the balloon. I was out of the service before the test was made, but they did run that test out, I think, in the Hawaiian Island area. And so our ideas got used and successfully. Okay. Next part of the area is at Raven Industries. And, of course, I was closely involved with the higher balloon development. That's been discussed a lot. I won't go into it any further. Besides, that's Ed Yost's memory. We had, while I was at Raven, we got an invitation from the Explorers Society. And maybe most of you probably even haven't heard of the Explorers Society, but Explorer Club. It's a very elite group of people composed of, on the one hand, people who are explorers, have done remarkable things in exploration, and elite people who have supported them, newspapers, individuals, broadcasters, and so on. And so Raven got this invitation, and I was elected to go to attend in our response. And I shouldn't say elected to, they couldn't grab it out of my hands. This is a program that was given out there, and there are just innumerable people. Again, the names may have faded by now, but keep going here. I'll read off just some of the more significant ones that might be a little more widely known. Admiral Rosendahl, he was involved in dirigibles. Captain Malcolm Ross, he was high altitude balloonist. Joe Kittinger, Bernd Balkan, a Arctic explorer. Peter Pellegrino, Lowell Thomas, a broadcaster. David Simons, another high altitude balloonist, and Werner von Braun. So it was a distinguished group, and very, very interesting to see all those people. And I got about half of their autographs. Okay. A couple of personal things. You heard about there has been a picture going by here of a gas balloon starting to launch, to be ready to go. And it's something that's not easy to picture, at least with what I have. But I took a gas balloon flight across the Alps from Switzerland, and it was in a valley, a sharp valley between some high peaks. And from the valley, it took us a whole hour to get up just high enough so we could cross the mountains. And then we went to the south primarily and ended up in Italy, 9-hour flight. And you just can't imagine the beauty of the mountains with the snow on the top. It's just something that's so picturesque. And you're only going. We were 14,000 feet altitude, and traveling 10 knots or so. And it takes a while to get across those mountains, but you don't mind it. You just can't absorb it. You're just looking around, and it's there, and just amazing. That may be my all-time most significant balloon flight, but then another one more recently, just last December, was put together by one of my other sons who isn't here, and it was in response to a significant birthday. We went to Egypt and went to Luxor, the Valley of the Kings, and we flew in a balloon over that region. That was kind of interesting because that's a big business over there. There were dozens of operators having these flights, and so there's no problem really getting a ride. But the rules are very strict. Nobody else but the pilot can fly, except they have a training balloon. So we got to fly in the training balloon. My son and I both got to fly over the Valley of the Kings. So That was a very good one. Well, with all that, oh, and I do have a picture of that. With all of those things to have in my memories, what would I want to take with me? Well, it comes down to this. I'd set aside all of those. What I would take along in my memory is this day, this time, right here. I very much appreciate this honor, and I can't say how much I like it. Thank you.
Dewey? Do you have a few things that you'd like to add to this? Well, while he's coming up here, I have to tell you one of the stories that Carl told me. You know, they live on a mountain, and every day he likes to go up the mountain. He said it's only 1,500 feet or something, you know, up high. And he said these kids keep running past him, and it just makes him so mad. And so he said, I'm working on my stamina. And he said, I figured by the time I'm 100, I can race them up there. This is Dewey Reinhardt. He's also another ballooning pioneer and a good friend. And he's so cute.
Well, it's been a long time since I've heard that. Congratulations, Jim. I've always been an admirer of you, and Carl, for your knowledge of ballooning and the technology involved. Lucy, I have a different kind of affection for. Let's see, Lucy, it's been probably 35 years since you and I flew together here. Yeah, and we were down trying to hide in the bushes, flying pretty low over some streams and what have you, and a huge butterfly landed on the edge of the balloon, and that started our romance, actually. So, and I've been in love with her ever since. She does, I mean, she's a sweet person, but she does have a couple of interesting flaws. And we were flying up, and Lucy had spent quite a bit of time with us off and on, and we did a lot of fun things together. And she helped us with the Colorado Springs Balloon Classic on occasion, and we took her flying up in Snowmass. And the altitude there, I think, the takeoff altitude is like 8,600 feet. Probably higher than a lot of you guys have ever flown. But anyway, density altitude affects balloons and people who consume alcohol. And Lucy is primarily a wine drinker, but Joe Wood, who's in this room, Joe, where are you? He brewed up a concoction called Green Death. And he would never tell us what's in it because I think it is probably illegal. But we all over imbibed one day, and it was just a total fiasco after we flew. And Lucy, we thought we'd lost her. We were staying in a country club up there, I think. They only let us stay there 1 year. And one of the things that happened to Lucy, I've never seen anyone could sleep as sound as she does. I mean, she just like almost dead. And when she'd been drinking, we really were concerned because, so concerned, as a matter of fact, she had these weird boots on. When she lay in bed flat on her back, and her boots are sticking straight up, just like Jeannie. I told Jeannie, I think she died with her boots on. Anyway, Jeannie gets a mirror out of her purse and puts it over her mouth because we didn't want to shake her. She was still with us, but that was her world record drinking experience while I've known her. And we've had some other really fun times. I did work with Carl when he was president of the CIA, and he was a really good president. I think I'd worked was not a delegate. I was the advisor, gas balloon advisor, and I was on the rules subcommittee. And Carl was totally impartial. I mean, I accuse him of not even being an American, because he was just right down the middle of the road, which is what that job called for. And the other, I worked under a Frenchman and a German over there, and they were not nearly as accommodating to the other countries as Carl was. So Carl was a great American and a great representative for the ballooning community. This place brings back so many memories, I can't believe it. We had some really interesting flights out of this place. And looking at the pictures, driving around town, we stayed in the dorms at Sampson College. Not air conditioned. Nobody told us the first time we came out here to bring a fan. We almost died on the spot. And it was in the evening. We were doing 2-a-day flights. They had one refueling truck, so we'd finish refueling about 11:30 at night, and take all of our kids to the room, try to keep them up and what have you. And one thing comes to mind, they used to switch the names on the restrooms all the time, so you never knew who you were going to run into in the restroom. It was kind of kept you on your toes. Well, I'm honored that Jeannie and I are very proud to be part of the Steffen family. They have a very, very accomplished family, and they've been really, really good for this sport of ballooning. Thank you.
I told you to hear some good ones. All right, is there anyone else from the audience or from the family that has something that they would like to say? Come on up. Mr. Bussey, do you have any retaliation or anything?
Well, I'm not quite sure where to start or where to stand, I guess. This is standard protocol. Yeah, okay. Well, I guess growing up in a ballooning family, didn't really know anything different. That's just what we did. And somehow it seemed that every family vacation, strangely, involved some ballooning event. If I thought about it, I might come up with 1 or 2 vacations that did not involve ballooning. Those would definitely be the exception. And as a result of that, every vacation slideshow, and of course there was always a vacation slideshow that we got to enjoy. There was a 15 to 25 slide interlude of the balloon launch, which at this point all seemed kind of interchangeable. But I remember taking trips to Reno and Knoxville for the BFA conventions, flying over the capital of South Dakota in Pierre for the bicentennial. My brother just reminded me of the Buffalo Ridge Rally where they had the Buffalo Chip Flip. All really exciting things growing up. And of course, we don't want to forget the pilgrimage every summer to Indianola. Sometimes when the topic comes up with friends or acquaintances and I said, well, I grew up, my dad flies hot air balloons and we did a lot of ballooning, and they always think, you must have had such an exciting childhood and kind of glamorous. And I had to tell them about the dormitories, coming to Indianola, staying in the dorms with the rip in the screen on the window and the eerie fluorescent light in the restrooms. That was the glamorous side of ballooning. And I guess Dad brought down the companion jumpsuit that was my mother's to the Black Swirl and asked me if I might wear it. And I thought maybe not. If he wants to, I totally support that. And I'm thinking, as we're looking back over the history of the jumpsuit, it probably wasn't really an option, but coming of age in the 70s in hot air ballooning, it was requisite to have the jumpsuit. And the fantastic thing about this is that everyone in my family had matching ones. So that was just genius. We drove over to the old field today, saw the lovely dorms, couldn't believe how small the field is. Somehow when I was smaller, it seemed so much bigger. The other thing I realized this morning after we finished this morning's flight, which was lovely, we're done at 8 o'clock, and it's like, wow, we've got a lot of time to kill until the evening flight, which was the case back in the day coming down for the Nationals. And so I had to figure out a way to kill all that time between flights. The main thing was hanging out at the Raven booth, which was always a ton of fun. But I got into a little side business along the way, which I believe I inherited from my brother. This picture I don't know if I've ever seen. But here I am at the Raven booth selling my wares, which happened to be shrink art balloon necklaces for 50 cents a piece. That was, and I'm thinking back, I'm like, 50 cents 30 years ago? That's pretty high price. Last couple of years I sold them, I think I did have raised the price to 75 cents. That may explain why I have a surplus stock. They didn't sell quite as well at 75 cents. So actually, I still have a whole box full of these, and I think for vintage memorabilia, available for $1 a piece later on. These are all Raven balloons, by the way. And of course, the other thing that was a fantastic pastime at the national races was collecting pins. I was looking at all the balloon pins over here. Some of them I recognized from back in the day. So that was always a way to spend some time. And of course, if you had the pins, you either had a jacket or a vest or something to pin them onto to display. Of course I wouldn't get rid of this. So, again, vintage 70s. I couldn't get rid of this hat. This is the best. So I do have very fond memories. I have to say, besides the BFA conventions and the Buffalo chip flipping, ballooning did provide some amazing opportunities. We've flying in the Olympics in 1980 at Lake Placid. I went on my first trip abroad to the World Championships in Nantes in France in 1983. My first trip to Japan, Saga for the Worlds there. We did the trip over the Alps. It's been really a fascinating journey.
Jeff Winker, I'm the second oldest of the Winker offspring. And I didn't actually plan on making any remarks when I came here today. We drove down from the Twin Cities. But sitting here, I've been kind of thinking there's maybe a few things that I could offer that just capture a little bit how ballooning penetrated the Winker family lifestyle. Somewhere in grade school, and I'm not even sure why anymore, I decided I wanted to start building model balloons. I mean, not replicas of the hot air ones, but just something you could fill up with air from your dryer and send them up. And I told my dad this, and he showed me how to sit down with a piece of graph paper and draw out an image of the balloon I wanted to build, and then how you would measure that off in such a way that you can make panels, and in this case, using the best available technology, which was tissue paper, cut them out, glue them together, and end up with a balloon. And so we did a few things to our dryer vent so we could inflate balloons, and the tissue paper was really kind of wanting in a lot of respects, just didn't have that structural integrity you would like to see in a modern product. And my second balloon, which was about 8 or 9 feet across, I think, lasted 2 flights until it had an unfortunate encounter with a chain link fence. And that was the end of that. At some later point, my dad, I don't know where he got this, but it was a roll of plastic film that you use for dry cleaners. They just cut off a piece, put it over things, and it doesn't get dusty. Well, this stuff was really very thin, which was good, and it was also green. So what I found out quite by accident after getting one of these put together is I had inadvertently made a solar balloon. And so we took it out and we flew it once or twice, and then the sun came out and it was never seen again. So I made one more like that, even a little bigger, except this time I attached a postcard to it that says, please call so-and-so if you find this thing. And so I deliberately sent it out on a sunny day, and I think it was some weeks later we got a postcard from somewhere in Nebraska. This was launching from Sioux Falls, so it had traveled something over 200 miles. So that was an interesting thing to be involved in as a young man. Now, my older brother, he really gets most of the credit for building balloons in our family because our first family balloon, the Led Zeppelin, was actually a high school science fair project that he was involved in. It was, I think Monsanto had donated some fabric to Raven, or Raven had some fabric that was experimental, and that's what he used for this balloon. It was determined that it probably wasn't suitable for commercial balloons, but we still got the balloon into the bargain. So that was our early history, was having a balloon that was novel, experimental, and as far as I know, the first tie-dyed balloon in the history of ballooning. My next younger brother, Greg, now he actually went on to become a professional balloonist for a while until I think he determined that you have to work at least 60 hours a week and play your cards right, and in a good week you'll make money. I don't know if anyone else has had that experience, but I think that was his. But he went on to make a number of balloons of all sizes. I think he started out when he was in his mid-teens making scale models of balloons that people were actually flying, and they had since he had access to all the information about Raven, it made it possible for him to make ones that were, I think, about 1/10 scale, about yay big, but included all the features of the individual balloons. And he would sell these kind of, people would contract to have him build them. And he went on to build a number of at least one or two small balloons for the purpose of record setting. I believe one of the Whitaker girls was involved with one of them. And I think he has some balloons now, or at least has done extensive renovation on them. So it's kind of like there's been a very large degree of being involved in this over the years. I guess I just wanted to wrap up with a few memorable flights, and I've got one each in the category of most idyllic flight, in which I was a passenger, least idyllic flight, in which I was a passenger, most idyllic flight I have ever crewed for, and the least idyllic flight that I have ever crewed for. I'll do those in somewhat reverse order. The least idyllic flight that I was ever involved with, I think we were flying around Sioux Falls. My dad was piloting, and I think I was getting student training. And I think it was the windy, 10 miles an hour perhaps when we launched. And we were heading north across the fields west of town. And somewhere off in the distance, you could see these high-tension power lines, and I mean 100,000-volt power lines. And I think we decided not to go over those. Was that it? That's what I remember. So anyway, but the wind was probably moving along at about 15 miles an hour at that point, and so really we had to get down in a farm field that we could get out of. It didn't have a barbed wire fence in the wrong place, and at the same time trying not to run in some of the lower voltage power lines in the vicinity. And I know it's not standard practice to pull out the top of the balloon when you're still about 15 feet in the air, but that's what we did because that was about the only way I think we figured we could get down and miss everything that we needed to miss. So that was exciting, to say the least. And although drag racing with a balloon is not likely to become a sport, it does resemble some landings, including this one. Now, let's see. The most idyllic flight of which I was actually a passenger was actually a gas balloon flight. There was someone, and I don't remember who or where they came from, who wanted to launch a passenger gas balloon of a location a few miles out of Sioux Falls one summer. Kurt Staling? Okay, thank you. Well, we got tapped to help set the balloon up and launch it. It was just one of the most wonderful experiences, not only just for its own sake, but in the fact that you're participating in a tradition that has been around for, at that point, probably close to 100 years. And that was just a lovely memory to have. The least idyllic flight in which I was not a crew member, or that I was a crew member but not a passenger, is I've got a small picture here. And it shows what happens when you land a balloon on what I'm guessing is about a 4,000-volt power line. Or 4,000-volt power line out in the country. It's not pretty. And I don't remember who that was either, but and I don't quite remember how things got out of control. But if you want to look at it later, it's got a balloon half draped over the power line, and I'm. You think so?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
He has a history from Carl's flight there.
Oh yeah, but the balloon, I don't know. I think when you short out the cable to the top of the balloon against the power line through the gondola, it's not good. So that was novel to say the least. And I guess that brings me up to what would be the most idyllic flight in which I have been a passenger. And that would have been actually, I think, not too far from here at Indianola, back in the early 70s, when we had been coming here for a few years, I think, at that time. And that was, I don't even remember who was piloting. I don't think it was my dad. But we had an ideal day. It was clear. The winds were almost calm. And I still remember drifting slowly across the cornfields, going up small hills and down creek valleys at Tassel Height. And it was just the most wonderful, peaceful, enjoyable experience I think I've ever had. So I want to say thank you for everything. Thank you, Dad, for making this all possible, and God bless you.
Just for my own interest, how many of you of both families got your balloon license, pilot's license at one time or another? Okay. 2? Anybody over here? None? No? Okay. Okay. All right. Oh, you're working on it. Oh, it's another generation. Good. All right. Anybody from the audience would like to say something? Well, I wondered. I thought you were kind of letting it slack. Yeah, that's fine.
I need to get even with Carl here just a second, if you'll bear with me. I was in the late 70s, and Schlitz and Strohs wanted me to wear those jumpsuits too, and I wouldn't do that, so I wore those big bell-bottom pants that had the balloon on the bottom by your boots. So that was really cool in those days. Carl, I tried so hard to make those radios work, and a good recall system, we thought, which didn't work. I recall balloons flying 40 miles and crashing and everything in that storm that we couldn't get them down in. But there's a little story about an Ardath airship that you might remember. Frank Ryder from Colorado and an oil man from Texas named Bill Coleman bought an airship in Australia. It's a little small one. I don't know the cubic feet, but they shipped that thing over here, packed it up in talcum powder or something, came to Bullard, Texas, and they had an airspace on the sectional charts of the aircraft sectionals, and I thought that was really great, and they were going to fly this blimp. So I went over to see them, and for some reason this thing was really, really porous, and they paid a lot of money for it. And I thought Carl was a brilliant man. And he told me that they were going to seal that porous airship with butter. I said, the man has lost his mind. And they took, he'll tell you the real story. They took, I don't know, 200 pounds of butter and smeared it all inside that airship, and darned if it didn't fly. Then I thought he was brilliant again.
But Bill, you're absolutely wrong.
I knew I'd be wrong. I'm going to sit down. I'm wrong.
It wasn't butter. It was Vaseline.
You're both pretty slick with that one. All right, is anyone else? Bonnie? No, I'm before her. She's still there. Anybody else here? Okay. I have another little bit special thing. You guys get the magazine, the honorary cartoonist, Miss Billy Nova. Well, he made a special cartoon for both of these people. This one, I just laughed all the way in it. Anyway, see this? And then I'll read it to you. And it says, these two young ladies are sitting here looking. It says James Winker, Hall of Fame, 2009. It says he spent 35 years working on development of the modern hot air balloon. I think that means he's one of those that picked the pretty colors. And then this one, oh, he hit the nail on the head with this one. Oh, look at that. Okay, I'll read it. And you notice Lucy's flying, and Carl's talking. That's a perfect pair. But Lucy, I'm a naval aviator. I'm a balloon designer, a world record holder, a former director of the VFA, past president of the IBC, and published author of LTA subjects. So when do I get my turn as the PIC? From their flight last night, compliments of Mr. Olivier. This is Serenity, and this is Jim and Carl. And so one of the people that takes a lot of pictures around here. It's what's her name? Paul and Lois. It's what? Lodola. I never say it right. Lodola. I don't know where the syllable goes, but anyway, it's them back there. Anyway, and they have a picture for both of you. This is the one with Carl waving and Jim being concentrating, and that's the fight last night.
Very good.
And so, if you want any more copies of that, they're back there. So, anyone else want anything to say? Because we have one more surprise. Okay. Just wait. Dennis, be ready.
Oh, no. This might be the first lobster balloonist. Oh, right here.
Carl the crustacean experimental. And Lucy the lobster experimental.
I got these lobsters about 5 days ago off the coast of Maine. And if they're not good, they're going to be in hot water tonight.
They're real. As Carl said, then they're real. And this has been a real good time, and thank you for all coming. We have plenty of food here. Do your congratulations, and then mosey on in for the treats. And thank you for coming. We'll see you next week.